Welcome to Big Soto Sports. I'm your host, Gary Somar. There's no question baseball is America's game. We invented it, and it's played at the highest levels at major league parks around the country. But I've always wondered, what's baseball like in other countries, say Cuba? Well, here to tell us is Chuck Hildebrandt. Chuck is a baseball historian and member of SABR, the Society for American Baseball Research. Chuck and his wife, Terry, recently took a baseball-themed trip to Cuba, and he's here to tell us about it. Chuck, welcome to the Big Soto Studios.
Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
So what's baseball like in Cuba? What are the stadiums like?
Well, the stadiums are, as you would expect, are a lot different from the United States. The United States, even college stadiums or even high school stadiums will have nice benches or even individual seats. Many of the stadiums in Cuba don't have seats at all. They're cement slabs that kind of go up from one row to the next row to the next row, so you're actually sitting on cement while you're watching the game. And if you have a bony butt like I do, that can kind of hurt. So knowing that going in, I actually stopped at a sports authority and I picked up a pad, one of those cushions that I could sit on for the stadium. And then after the last game, I handed it to one of the girls that was sitting near me and I said, here's a nice souvenir.
What's the playing surface like in Cuba?
So the playing surface in stadiums in Cuba, even at the highest level, are roughly the same as you might see in an adult men's amateur game here in public parks or at schools. They're not well manicured. There's pox in the outfield, pock marks all over the outfield. It's kind of, it might be what you would have seen when you see a picture of a major league game from like 1940s or 50s. It might be like that. A lot of garbage on the field and things of that nature. The dimensions are major league dimensions. There's just as much foul ground as you might see in a major league stadium, but the quality of the field is just not that good. And that's because there's not a lot of money in Cuba for them to maintain very high standards of landscaping in the stadium.
What's the atmosphere at a Cuban baseball game? Is it rowdy? Is it subdued?
Well, I'd say it can be rowdy at times in certain sections. There'll be groups of guys who will be there waving cowbells and singing songs and beating on drums. So it kind of gets people into the atmosphere of the game. It's a lot of fun. It is different than what you see here, which is a much more subdued experience.
So describe what it's like when you're walking into the stadium in Cuba. What's the atmosphere like?
So when you're going into a game to see it, so we probably would arrive maybe a half an hour before the game, and we're special guests as Americans and Canadians on a baseball trip. So we might end up meeting the manager before the game, or even going onto the field and shaking hands with some of the players or taking pictures. So that's kind of unique to us. But otherwise, when you walk in, you'll see the players on both teams warming up, limbering up, and practicing. And it's kind of interesting because they don't do traditional batting practice with a batting cage in the way that we do it here. What they'll do is that they'll set up nets that will be up against the stands, and then they'll hit off of tees, or they'll do soft toss and hit into the net. And that's what their batting practice will be. And also there will be some guys who will be lined up along foul lines playing catch with other guys the way that we do it before our games. Now, you wouldn't really see that in American professional baseball games, but that's what they do at Cuban games. It's really very interesting. It's almost like a throwback, because you can imagine maybe 100 years ago in the major leagues, that's how they warmed up as well.
Chuck, what are some of the stark differences during the game between American baseball and Cuban baseball?
Well, probably the biggest difference that an American will notice watching a game in Cuba is there is no seventh inning stretch. They have a fifth inning coffee break. So what happens during this is that attractive young ladies, not skimpily clad, but they're attractive, they'll bring a platter full of coffee for the umpires who will all come in from their bases, and they'll have coffee. while the Cuban teams are out warming up. This is the way that they take a break during the middle of the game. So being Americans, of course, at the end of the top of the seventh, we all had to stand up as a group and start singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And the Cubans are looking at us like, what is going on here? But, that is something that we did at every game. We thought it was proper for us to do it as Americans, right? And we just had a great time. And we were entertaining to the people around us, too. So that's a bonus.
So after the game is over, is there interaction between the fans and the players?
So unlike Americans, Canadians have been going to Cuba as a Caribbean destination for decades. It's actually their #1 destination. So lots of times, they're a baseball country too, so lots of times they'll go over and they'll watch a Cuban game. So the Cuban players, they got the smart idea of coming out after the game and selling their game-worn equipment for extra money. See, in Cuba, everybody basically makes the same salary. Whether you're a doctor or a garbage man or a baseball player, everybody pretty much makes the same salary. But the Cuban government kind of looks the other way. And Cuban baseball players are government employees, just like everybody is. But they've learned to look the other way while players make a few extra bucks selling their game-worn equipment. So after one of the games, I encountered one of the players. I saw that he wanted to sell his cap. I asked to take a look at it. I tried it on. It fit. I said, how much? He said, 10. I'm like, sure, 10. No problem. He could have said 100, and it would have been no problem. It was kind of funny, though, because the cap did smell like Axe body spray for about 3 weeks afterwards, but it's fine now. But it's a good fit, and it's a nice souvenir to have.
Chuck, Cuba, of all the countries you could have visited for this baseball-themed trip, why did you choose there?
So the Cuba ball trip is actually, they've been doing it for almost 20 years now. And the guy who runs it is out of Canada, Kit Krieger and his brother Bob have been doing this trip for a long time out of Canada. So in order for us Americans to go to Cuba, we had to arrange it not as a tourism trip, but through the through the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the United States government, and we had to register as a people-to-people exchange. And that's how we got official clearance for us to be able to use our American passports in order to go to Havana, have the passport stamped and all that stuff. So Americans, I've learned, have been sneaking into Cuba through Mexico for years. It's just that they can't show their passport, they can't stamp the passport, or they might get in trouble. But this was actually the first year that the Cuba ball people were able to get Americans in legally through OFAC, the Foreign Assets Control Office, and allow us to register and go legally, I guess you could say. So yeah, but even though there are no scheduled flights from the United States to Cuba, at least there wasn't then, so we had our choice of either flying through Toronto to Havana, which they've had flights going there for decades again, or we could have flown through Cancun to Havana, and we decided to go through Toronto. So that's how we arranged it. I mean, I could say that I have a love of Cuban culture, and that I love the Cuban people and all that, but basically it was a lot more prosaic than that. I got a weekly newsletter from SABR, the Society of American Baseball Research that I belong to, and one of the sections of it said, Cuba ball trip 2015, do you want to go? And I said, you know what? That sounds really good.
We all know the Cuban superstars, the Puigs, the Jose Abreu's. What are the rest of the lineups of the Cuban teams, the 5, 6, 7 hitters? Are they any good?
So if you would have gone back maybe a decade before Cubans started defecting to the United States to play Major League Baseball, you might have said that Cuba plays at anywhere from a AAA to Major League level. But since there has been so much defection of the top stars from Cuba to the U.S. leagues now, I would say that the play roughly lives at a high A to double A level with a few superstars. So while I was there in 2015, Yulieski Gurriel, who is now the first baseman for the Astros, was playing then, and he was considered kind of like a bright line major league level star in Cuba at the time. And now even he's gone, so there are precious few of those guys left in that country. So another big difference between American games and Cuban games is, in American games you have sort of like Andy Frayne type ushers. You remember those guys from Wrigley Field?
Oh, yeah.
Very friendly guys or ladies that you would come in and they would just seat you and all. They're very friendly. In Cuba, they don't have ushers. They have armed security guards, or even police. I think they're probably actually Cuban police. And they have one stationed in every section, very sternly sitting there, making sure that nothing goes wrong. And I would think that if anybody's going to get rowdy and cause a ruckus, the last place they would do it in is Cuba, a police state. Mm-hmm. But they have them there anyway, because I guess that's how you maintain a police state. You have police everywhere. So that's what it's like in Cuban games. I don't know if it's off-putting or not, but it's definitely different.
Well, Chuck, thank you very much.
Oh.
That was fantastic. You got to come back on the show again, and I hope everyone out there enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Looking forward to it.